The person that did the abortion was actually my boyfriend at the time. One of the things I remember him saying was, you know, it's just one more chapter in your story of life. You're gonna get through it.
The pain that I caused my wife is a sorrow that I'm gonna carry with me the rest of my life.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm so grateful that you're here and willing to share your stories. Could you each share your name and your story and experience with abortion?
My name is Ron. Over 50 years ago, I convinced my wife to have an abortion. Now, at the time, I would have told anybody that it was a mutual decision, but looking back on it now, it was me. I coerced her. There's just no question about it now that I've taken stock in my life and looked back. The pain that I caused my wife is a sorrow that I'm gonna carry with me the rest of my life. Our marriage dissolved. She moved away, never remarried, and never had a family. So you can imagine how I feel about that. But of course, what's worse, that I also carry around with me, is I took the innocent life of my unborn son. However, about 6 years ago or so, or might even have be earlier, because I think sometimes when you're getting into a healing journey, sometimes you don't even know when you start it. But I know I had a crisis about 6 years ago, and it took me 3 years to find help. It's not really easy for men to find help and healing and hope from an abortion, but I finally found it. Christ didn't let me go, and by His grace, I am now working as well, attempting to outreach to men to help them post-abortion like the men that helped me. I'm blessed to have that journey.
I'm Roxana, and I had an abortion when I was about to graduate from my last semester in college, and the person that did the abortion was actually my boyfriend at the time. My boyfriend was a medical resident at the time when he did the abortion on me, and I was just only provided the option of having the abortion. I was never spoken to about the repercussions of how there's emotional consequences, even psychological consequences. One of the things I remember him saying was, you know, it's just one more chapter in your story of life. You're gonna get through it. And so in my mind, I said, yeah, I'm gonna get through it. I'm just gonna leave it there. When I realized he had moved on and was with someone else, that opened up Pandora's box of everything that I had suppressed. And what's worse was that I took a class. It was on death and dying. And I remember just watching these parents come in where they were gonna talk about their experiences about stillbirth or having lost a child in some traumatic way. I was sitting in class, and all of a sudden I started to notice my heart start to race. I had to run out of the classroom. I had to step away, and I went into the bathroom, and I just was overwhelmed with all these different emotions. I didn't know what to do with them. So I came back, and still I was in such great denial that I even emailed the professor and said I had a miscarriage, because I was so ashamed of saying that my boyfriend and I had done an abortion. And so I continued with just this denial, and until I received some healing. But it was one of the hardest things, and it still is. I carry the grief. It's hard not to, remember that you were a mom. I was a mom, and I'm 38. I'm not married. I don't have any children, so.
My name is UC. Almost 30 years ago, I pressured my girlfriend into having an abortion. Absolutely regretted that decision, but I was driven by fear. I wish I had the courage to talk to someone about it, but I didn't. Looking back now, I realize that all the things that I was afraid of were non-issues. It's interesting because we had a great relationship, her and I. And I knew that. And if I had said to her, we're gonna have this baby, it wasn't a question about it. Not because I controlled her or whatever, but because of that support. And because that support wasn't there, it was easier for her to do it, right?
Are you saying you feel like if you had told her, we're going to have this baby, she would have had that baby?
Absolutely, yes.
I'm Leslie. In my last year of nursing school, I was married and I got pregnant, and my parents and my husband both encouraged me to finish school. That was my priority, that I needed to finish school, and that we could always have a child another time. So I went forward with the abortion. And about a year later, when I was a new graduate, I had kind of been forced into assisting with a second trimester abortion, and witnessed that baby being born alive and dropped in a bucket, and it lived for about, I would say, 6 seconds. Extremely, extremely traumatizing. My first abortion was in my face. And my marriage ended, and then I remarried a couple years later, and had a child with this husband, and then got pregnant again. And he said he would leave if I did not have an abortion. And I begged for the baby's life. I just begged after everything that I had been through with the other two situations. I was desperate for this baby's life, but I was also extremely codependent. So I wanted to please him, and I didn't want to be alone. So I went through with that one as well.
I'm Dr. Haywood Robinson, and my first experience with abortion was in 1973 when I was a junior undergraduate. I got my girlfriend pregnant, but because I was focused on my own direction, I was not going to bother with having a child. What I did, I bullied my girlfriend with the help of a counselor into getting an abortion. And I realized that even though that I did not use the instruments, I paid for that abortion, and I bullied her. I bullied her into getting that abortion, and I was an abortionist. Even before going to medical school, I did go to medical school and finished residency, where I learned to do the abortion procedure, and for a number of years, along with my late wife, we were abortionists, and we aborted many, many children. In addition to that, I had a near-miss abortion when I was an undergraduate after that first aborted baby, my firstborn. And thankfully that child survived and is now 50 years old and is a physician. So I've had experience bullying, doing the abortions myself, and now being a pro-life physician who's fighting for babies.
My name is Hallie. I grew up in Orange County, California. At the age of 15, I met a boy who I dated for 3 years. It was a very abusive relationship. I ended up ending the lives of 3 children. So I lost a baby at 15, 16, 17. I wasn't given a choice. I was told what I was going to do. Again, this was a very abusive relationship, physically, emotionally, sexually. I was handled by him, if that makes sense. I was basically like a puppet being used by this young man. So I was picked up from high school each and every time and dropped off at the clinic, and then was picked up afterwards. So each time, my soul became more and more broken, and feeling as if I deserved to be punished in a way. It was pressure each and every time, and told basically, this is what you're going to do.
I'm Priscilla Hurley, and the pressure from abortion has been with me for many years. My mother was widowed when she was pregnant with me, and that grief led her to attempt to abort me. And my twin passed away in that procedure, but I was saved. But the way that played out when I was 19, I got pregnant in college, and she immediately came and took care of the problem through a hospital abortion, the same procedure as she had 19 years earlier. 4 months after I was recovering from that, and I just went along because I was an obedient child. But 4 months later, she looked at me and said, "By the way, I tried to have you aborted." And that was when I was told. And it just immediately, first thing I thought about was, that's why I've never felt wanted. To be honest, that's what I felt. So I continued to move along. At 25, I was in another relationship and got pregnant again. And this time I succumbed to the authority of the boyfriend, who was in law school and didn't really want to deal with a baby. So it was after Roe v. Wade, so it was a office procedure done by a doctor. And just mind you, these relationships didn't last after the abortion, and that's pretty typical. But I didn't want to have an abortion, and I succumbed to the pressure of my boyfriend. And I think that's why I get emotional hearing the men here today, because that's healing to hear men taking responsibility for their part of pressuring and recognizing the pure damage that does, and having regrets themselves, unfortunately, but forgiveness, can help with all of that. But there's a lot of pressure from a lot. I think one of them is just expecting sex. I mean, babies are made because of sex, and I think I was in that environment at college where, sexual freedom revolution. So there was that going on, and I think, I easily wanted love, not having that much as a child, and I really got into that confusion of sex equaling love, and didn't realize till much later in my life that was a really a big problem to equate those two, because there's nothing creative or beautiful about it. When it ends in abortion, it becomes destructive. So,
Thank you. Roxana, did you feel any pressure from your partner to abort? And if so, can you share more about that?
I definitely did, because I wasn't given any life-affirming options like, we got this. Like, we can raise this baby together. Things will work out. Instead, it was like, well, here's this option, and that's it.
Because he did the abortion.
He did the abortion
on you. So
he did the abortion on me.
Was that something that you felt you experienced by force of some kind?
I mean, I wasn't like I wasn't strapped down and I don't know, locked into a room or anything, but the way that he did the abortion, it wasn't something that I can openly share, but it was degrading. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard to talk about.
I'm so sorry. Leslie?
Well, first, I feel like I should start out by saying I loved kids. I wanted 12 of my own. I used to babysit for 12 kids when I was 15, and I was like, I'm going to do this. So when I got married, my husband also knew that. I was in my last year of nursing school. He was in school as well, and I got pregnant, and I was really happy. And he was happy initially. My dad was in the Navy. He was an admiral, and he was very much used to being in control of everything and everybody. And I had been trained at an early age to succumb to that. So when he started saying that I needed to have an abortion because I needed to finish school, and I said, but this is your grandchild, and he said, you can have another baby. You can have it another time when you've got your school, because school was everything to him. I realized my husband's attitude had also changed. It went from being supportive to being, yeah, he's right, we need to do this. For a couple weeks, I was like trying to work this out, but he said, no, you really need to do this. You need to do this so we can, I've got another year of school after you graduate, and we're not going to make it if financially, and that was the other thing my dad brought up. He kind of did the silent treatment for a while, and I just felt like I had to be convinced to do it, so I did. And I actually went to a doctor because I was a nurse, and I knew about gestational age and stuff. I said, I just need to know there's no heartbeat. There's no, it's just a clump of cells. There's no heartbeat. And by that time, I was probably 7 to 8 weeks. So I went forward with the abortion. And about a year later, when I was a new graduate, I had kind of been forced into assisting with a second trimester abortion. Witnessed that baby being born alive and dropped in a bucket, and it lived for about, I would say, 6 seconds. Extremely traumatizing. Went home that night very scarred and very angry with my husband. And all of that anger led to our marriage ending. And so I remarried. I delved into, as maybe some people here recognize, into a lot of drinking and some drugging and some promiscuity, and met somebody on the docks of Annapolis and married him 3 weeks later. That's how unhealthy I was and how much depression and trauma I had in my life. So we had a child. We got pregnant almost immediately. We were married when we got pregnant, and he was happy about that. He was also, and I didn't know this at the time, an IV drug user. So we had our baby, and then a year later I got pregnant again, and he had gone into rehab, and his excuse for the abortion was that he couldn't handle it after just coming out of rehab. It would cause him to drink again. It would cause him to use again. All the guilt was laid on my head that it would be my fault if he started all those things again. And I was, again, so unhealthy at that time that I bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Did you fight him at all and say,
Oh,
I want this baby?
I mean, for 2 weeks, and I finally just gave in.
Why didn't you want to have that other abortion with your second husband?
Why didn't I?
Why didn't
Oh my
you?
gosh, because I was so crushed after the first. And I had my new baby, and I just, every time I looked at my son, I was like, I have another one. You know, I would have had another one. And then the baby that I saw dropped in the bucket, that mother was screaming. She realized what a big mistake she made. The doctor showed it to her. It was awful. And so all these things were in my head, and I was like, I can't do this again. I can't do this again. When I went into the hospital, I told the doctor, I said, I have to be put to sleep this time. I can't be awake for this one. And when I went into the hospital, the anesthesiologist had given me some Versed, which kind of triggers you out. I remember hearing in my head so clearly, get up and run, get up and run, get up and run. And it was over and over and over. And I remember trying to get up, and I couldn't move. And I tried to grab the anesthesiologist's hand, and he said, it's okay. He just patted my hand. It's okay. It's okay. Everything's going to be all right. And the last thing that I remember thinking when he put the mask on my face was that nothing was ever going to be okay again. And when I came out after recovery and came out, they rolled me out in a wheelchair into the waiting room, and my husband was there. I'm just going to be really candid with you here, because if I'd had a gun, he'd have been outed. I was so angry. Yeah. I didn't speak to him for months after that. And he went back to drinking and using anyway, which was a real slap in my face.
Did you divorce him?
We divorced after I got pregnant again, and about a year later. When I went to the doctor, they were now doing sonograms. They weren't doing ultrasounds with the other two. And he said we were going to do an ultrasound. I was really happy. And I saw my little 8-year-old, it was like a little Teddy Graham, hopping around. I saw the heartbeat. Yeah, 8 weeks. And I was driving home. I had a picture. I was so happy. And boom. That's how old the other two were. They weren't blobs of tissue. Yeah. They did have a heartbeat. And I fell apart. I really fell apart.
Thank you, Leslie. I'd love to hear Dr. Robinson and anyone else on this side of the table, your experiences. What was your mindset when you were, dealing with a girlfriend who was pregnant and you were encouraging abortion? You're obviously hearing the opposite story here about what women who experience pressure were feeling and thinking. What were you feeling and thinking?
For me, I realized after, I never thought about the child. It was not, personality-wise, that was not in my head. It was not in my head.
How old were you?
19 or 20.
At what point, UC, did you feel any kind of regret for not encouraging her or helping her with the baby and choose life instead of abortion?
I think when I came to faith, and when I got serious with that it changed who I was. And one of the things that I started to do is go back in my life to the people that I have negatively impacted and apologize to them, right? It was definitely hard for her. So I had dropped her off. I didn't go in. I picked her up, and probably that was the first time I realized the impact of it, because I saw how sad she was, right? She was extremely sad. So I knew then it was a bad idea. But I found her, and at the time she wasn't a mom yet, and I expressed how sorry I was for putting her in that position. And as always, she was gracious. She was just absolutely gracious.
Thank you, UC. Ron?
I can remember this now, even though I had it completely suppressed. I can remember this like it happened yesterday. We were in the living room. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor looking up at her on the couch when she said, "I'm pregnant." So I think this is kind of layered in the way I kind of try to think about it. First of all, my background is I'm a trained engineer. So, engineers fix things, men fix things. So this is a problem, okay? And we also like to deal with facts. So I don't know if you're familiar with Star Trek and the character of Spock, okay? He's the dude that total logic, no emotions whatsoever. Well, that was me. So I was the alpha in that relationship. I had a game plan for us. We weren't going to start a family until we were in our 30s. I was like 25 or 6 years old, 26, I think, when this happened. That was kind of very popular back in the 70s, as you know. You needed to get ahead. We were both kind of from a poor background in a way, and we were both working, and she had to go back and after working a couple of years and finish up her college education so she could be a teacher. I mean, so I got all these facts now too. That was our game plan, but it was really my game plan. I made that decision without one single hug and not a single prayer. And that haunts me. To this day, and for the rest of my life, that'll haunt me. Now, we never talked about it, okay? And like I mentioned before, our marriage dissolved, and she moved away, and I wound up getting into serial relationships, near alcoholism, and the workaholism that I was on, I put it on steroids, chasing bigger paychecks and promotions and things of that nature, and looking for support from other areas that were not healthy. So what hurts me the most is I never hugged her. Not once. How can you do that? I grew up in a Christian family. I was a Sunday school teacher and a youth advisor. How do you do that? Well, I fixed the problem with a perfect plan, wasn't it? But it wasn't. It was a horrible plan.
Did you guys ever talk about having children together?
We did, but again, it was the game plan in the early 30s. Okay, once we got ahead, and once she got back and got her college education finished and all the rest of it, of course, engineers have game plans.
Oh, I know. My dad was an engineer. I understand. Trust me.
But if me being controlling and, just this logical Spock way, what was really in her heart when she was finally living with me like that?
That's where I was going.
This really bugs the heck out. Well, it just is hitting me so hard. I wrote her a letter of apology. When you go through all this healing, you have to apologize to everybody that you've hurt in your life, even outside the abortion. But you don't confront a person if it's going to do more harm. So she moved away. So I have that letter still on my hard drive. You're supposed to get rid of them after you go through healing, aren't you? You're supposed to have some sort of ceremony to get. I can't get rid of that letter. So I don't know. And that hurts even more than I wish she would have. If God had been in my life, how could I have done what I did? Where was the prayer? Where was the thought of the child? It was unorganized cells, see? And now that I've seen what a D&C was all about, how in the world could that doctor even tell me that was unorganized cells? But that's not an excuse. The real excuse is I didn't say without a prayer. I was a Christian zombie.
Well, it was some very interesting experiences. I think back to my first experience in 1973 when I was at undergraduate, 20 years old. I guess by definition a man, but a big boy out of control in a culture that free love thing, songs like, it's your thing, do what you want to do. I can't tell you who to sock it to. And that was our lifestyle, right? That's what you hear. You're programmed to live a certain way, and I was enjoying it. And like I said, I was on my quest to be a doctor, and nothing was going to stand in the way. I didn't understand what fatherhood was about. I did not have a good relationship with my father, but I had a father in the household. But when my girlfriend became pregnant, I said, that's just a speed bump on my freeway of love. This is just something that can be taken care of. So I just manipulated and visited with a counselor before met with the girlfriend, so that when the meeting actually happened, she had absolutely no chance. What I recognize now that was going to be my firstborn. I did name that child. I believe it was going to be a boy, Daniel. That boy would have been 53 years old, and again was killed during the first year that Roe v. Wade was in effect. Well, that child would have had children, I believe. I would have had grandchildren from that child. I would probably even have a great-grandchild. My family tree was broken. I have a saying that I say that abortion, kills trees, family trees. And of course, my lifestyle didn't change. Less than 2 years later, I'm in the same situation. I get my girlfriend pregnant. I'm trying to run the game on this one, but was not successful. Went as far as to have the abortion appointment already made, but thank God her father intervened. That abortion did not happen. And so now I'm thankful to see that child is now 50 years old. But that child got married and had 3 children. One of those 3 children, of course, which are my grandchildren, had a child. I am a great-grandfather and it was a near miss abortion. So I can see, now that was it didn't replace what I lost from the fatherhood of my firstborn, but it lets me see that you gotta have a purpose for life. And so it's not only just the loss of that one abortion, but it's all of the offspring that follow in the generations. And as I went through medical school and residency, where I was trained to do abortion became a way of life to make money. Now, I can say I never really enjoyed doing abortions, but let me tell you, money is a wonderful anesthesia. You have to be dehumanized and depersonalized, so that's not a baby that you're killing. It's a procedure you're performing, you see? And that process of rehumanization and repersonalization has to happen for you to have the healing and recognize the damage and the loss that you've had.
I'd love to hear from Hallie. What goes going through your heart or mind just hearing both fellow women sharing their stories and the gentleman on this side of the table talking about their regrets?
That I wasn't alone, that there were others that were pressured and forced. A lot's going on. I forgave both men in my life a long time ago for the pressuring. I never got a hug either. I don't think I ever heard, "I'm sorry." I've chosen to forgive, and this is very healing for me to be here with you gentlemen. And my heart is for post-abortive men to also get help and healing and ministry. I myself have had a lot of that. Went through forgiven and set free and so forth, and named my children as well. You know, kept this dark secret. I've come to realize it was Mother Teresa that said the greatest destroyer of love and peace is abortion. And this child was being made in secret. And then I had this tormenting secret to deal with. You know, I destroyed these innocent lives in this sacred place. Each time I share my story and meet folks like you, it's just, it's more healing for me. It's a hard story to tell. It's hard to hear with all the multiple lives that were taken. But I know God has a plan and a purpose in these losses, and being here today has been and is I just consider it such a gift. I'll say this one other thing. The Lord shared with me, I went into those abortion clinics scared. I came out scarred. Why? Because life is sacred. And you're not going to come out unscathed. You're not. I don't care if you are one that celebrates your abortion and you think that you're not going to be marked or scarred from that, you will be. Mm-hmm. So again, this has just been really healing for me and helpful, and I appreciate your all honesty in being here today.
Priscilla, what's going through your heart listening to this? You were tearing up earlier.
I know.
I know.
I just appreciate, again, having the men in the room. I think I've also had interaction with both of the men in my life that were involved in the abortion and forgiveness, and that's healing. But I think what struck me when you said you never hugged her, that really penetrated me, because I feel like this whole abortion journey, even when my mother tried to abort me, you know, we talked about it, but she never asked me to forgive her. And we never hugged about, there was no love passed. And I think this is part of the damage that abortion does, is that it's just so destructive. And I know that men, you say we get the short end of the stick because we carry the children, but men suffer too. And I think I just, the courage that it takes for everybody here at this table to come and share is part of what's going to break the stronghold over this. And the last thing I wanted to say was the humanity of the unborn. and not a clump of cells. Part of my survival, trauma, recognizing and coming to terms with my own humanity. Because when you have, that attempted abortion and it's kind of passed on even through, non-verbally, that you're not valued, you're not worth being here. Yeah. I tried to get rid of you before you were born. When you survive that, I think it took me a long time to value myself as a human being. And having an abortion is not far from that, right? Because you're not valuing that child as a human being. And so it's been a journey for me, Lila, to be able to say, the inhumanity of abortion, and then coming to terms with the humanity of the child and the rights that child has. Did I not have a right to live? Did my twin not have a right to live? And it just makes me so upset that the abortion industry has been able to continue to brainwash people into thinking things that are just basically, lies. And I really empathize with Dr. Robinson, and I just thank you especially for coming out and sharing that trouble with doing abortions. I mean, and I just, I was involved in the industry. I was the support person on this end, but I know there's just a lot of money, that a lot of money that's motivating people, and so I'm thankful for all the people that have been there, done that, coming out and trying to make a difference on the other side. So,
And from a physician's point of view, what we witnessed after 1973 was something that's still rather perplexing. Because we had I look at medicine as a ministry, actually. And the purpose of our ministry with these hands was really to first do no harm, and Hippocratic Oath, which said you weren't going to do abortions. But something happened in 1973, and it had to do with where our culture was going. But this whole abortion, genocide, and Holocaust should not have happened. What we had was a massive betrayal of the public trust for physicians to basically become the executioners for the death penalty of Roe v. Wade, to where we killed 2,000 babies a day. It just really doesn't make sense. But when you're dealing with something that evil and that magnitude, I was speaking to some medical students yesterday at Texas A&M College of Medicine, sharing this same testimony, and just telling them, please don't go, down this path. Don't become invulnerable. Your purpose is to heal and to not bring damage, but physicians, we need to apologize and ask the forgiveness of the public for massively altering our population. We're dealing with a horrible, massive global genocide, and with God's help, we can get that turned around.
Roxana, what's kind of going through your mind right now, listening to these different stories?
Well, thank you for the gentleman that decided to be courageous and talk about your perspectives and just what you've been through, because I never had really a chance to ever talk to, my ex-boyfriend about what truly was the experience for him and what emotionally drove him to, influence me in that way. I've forgiven him. I from the bottom of my heart, I've forgiven him. I had a friend once, when I shared my story with her, she said, what would you do if you happen to see him in person and he has children and he's married? And I said, well, he is married and I know he must have children. And at that time, it broke my heart just to hear her ask me that question, because I'm not married. I don't have children of my own. But just hearing, you men talk about your experience, it's heartbreaking. It really is. And I think that as a society, the trickling effects of, normalizing abortions and just this dishumanization of the unborn has surpassed, even the United States. It's global, and it's just so sad.
What is there something that you wish he would have said or done, looking back? Your boyfriend?
Well, just have told me the truth. I had his baby, and that things would be okay. But because I love children, I have 8 incredible nieces and one nephew, and I love them to death. Every time I spend time with them, it's one of my most favorite shared moments. So it's just, in my heart, I'm missing someone. And it's, like Dr. Robinson said, it's a branch of a tree, a family tree that will never blossom in this earth. I know for a fact my son is in heaven, interceding for my family, but it's just heartbreaking because that he didn't allow me to let that unfold.
I have really appreciated this. I did have the blessing of my second husband reconnecting through Facebook with me, so that he could ask forgiveness for everything, because he walked out of my life when I was pregnant with our third son, and we just never saw him again. But when I was healing from my abortions, I needed to know from God that my babies were okay. And so I prayed really hard this night that, I just, felt finally that I'd forgiven myself, as well as knowing that Jesus had forgiven me. And so I went to sleep, and I had this dream, and in the dream I was walking along this river, and I can hear all these children playing, like laughing and playing all around me. And I walked towards the tree, and I realized it's Jesus sitting there. And there are these 2 children that have kind of separated from the other children, and they're kind of playing around him. And so I went and I was like, Jesus, and he said, I said, where am I? And he said, you're in heaven. And I was like, okay. And he said, I want you to sit down. And when I did, the kids came and sat in my lap, and they were the same age they would have been had they lived. And they hugged me, and I hugged them, and then they ran off and played. And I was thanking Jesus for the opportunity to see them. He goes, I wanted you to have that, but I also want you to know something else. Your children prayed for you, because if you never came to know me, they were never going to get to meet their mom. Mm-hmm. I woke immediately after that part of the dream, and it was so compelling. And I shared this with my ex-husband, and it just brought tears to him, because I said, you're going to get to meet him. Or I believe the baby that we had together was a boy. I said, you're going to get to meet him when you go to heaven. It was a very compelling, I wanted to offer that to the men, that even though they may feel that there is, guilt or regret or whatever, they're still going to, at that gate, I believe they're going to be met by their children. And there isn't going to be any need for anything but hugs.
That's right.
I think the biggest question I have is just the initiation for healing. Like what was that process like for you guys?
I got introduced to a post-abortive Bible study, and that's when I came to the realization that these children had lives and deserved to be named and recognized as separate individuals. So that was the start of my journey. So I was able to name my children, which was part of the healing. That was really powerful for me. Also very painful, but that was the start of it.
I think talking about it is, recognizing that you need healing and then making your heart available. There's a lot of ways. Forgiven and set free is what I went through, but I think it's hard for women to forgive themselves. And I think that's one thing that some of the Bible studies will help you deal with, because we're in good company in the Bible as far as, people committing really horrible things and finding God's grace and Psalm 51, is a great one to go to.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for your stories. I know how hard it is for men to come forward to find their healing. And I pray that there's a man out there that's going to watch this and listen to you. Because oftentimes I've been told that by people that are healers and for addiction and things like that, the men need a crisis before they come in. And it's rarely because of how they're feeling about abortion. It's because they're alcoholic or they have sexual issues and all the rest of this stuff. And it isn't until later on when they're in their healing program, months and months later, where there's some trust built up, that all of a sudden abortion pops up, in terms of trying to get the table cleared. Okay? And I keep wondering, why is it so tough for us to walk in first with an abortion issue? Because what this guy tells me, he's run 3 clinics in his lifetime, is about 90% of these guys that are in there for this stuff have an abortion in their background. So I think the crisis sometimes can come for listening to your stories. I mean, I'm amazed at your stories. I also want to thank you also for saying you've forgiven some men. Perhaps I needed to hear that. I'm not sure, but I think I did.
I think for me that was one of the biggest things, where I had blamed the men initially for making the decision for me. And through the healing process, I had to come to a place of taking accountability. I'm the one that could have walked away and said no, and I didn't. And that really, and that's where Jesus' love and grace comes, just pours on you, because that's where we have to deal with our stuff.
I know when I made that decision, I gave up on any bit of masculinity I ever had. Okay? I wasn't a father protector. I wasn't a godly, disciplined father protector. I was the exact opposite. And so I'm hoping that some men hears this and hears your stories.
I just love that. I love your calling right now, because I think men don't realize their position with God in terms of this whole issue, being the father, the provider, the head of their households.
Who brought up the family tree that the loss?
Yeah. Abortion kills trees, family
Yeah,
trees. Yeah.
Between my 3 sisters and I, my parents lost 7 children to abortion. So they really missed out on. I think about what they would have been, could have been.
Can I tell a quick story? I know I probably not videoed.
No, tell it.
But my grandson, who is 20 now, he joined the Army Reserve at the age of 17, right after he graduated, and he's trained to be a chaplain's assistant. And when he was in his AIP, I think that's what they call it, where he learns his training, they separated the class and said, you're going to deal with this abortion issue as chaplain's assistant. So pro-life people here, pro-abortion people here. And so he went over to the pro-life side, and they went around and talked and shared. And when they got to him, he said, I stand here because if my great-grandmother's abortion would have succeeded, I wouldn't be here today. And I thought, whoa, I was so proud of him. And plus, just that reality of realizing what Dr. Robertson and everybody else has been saying about the generations that are cut off. And hopefully that impact, just those words, impacted some of the other guys in the room that were there. So just little things like that, you know.
I'd also like to share a story a little bit like yours. One of the things when I was going through my healing, by the way, I don't know if you're familiar with a fellow by the name of Greg Mayo. He speaks all around the country. He was initially with Sport After Abortion, but he pulled in the 12-step, from the Recovery Bible, and it's also the big book for AA. And he's got it for guys with abortion. So, I mean, this thing was like, we had to go through all sorts of stuff. But one of the things that really bugged me about this, even going to my knees and everything else like that, was I could never cry for my son. So there was a Catholic priest from Boston who was Zooming in on some of these sessions. He says, Ron, you need to write a psalm. I said, I'm not David. I'm not Solomon. I can't do this. But, yeah, you need to write a psalm. And typically, when you give me an assignment, it just sits there like a monkey on my shoulder. So weeks go by, I haven't written a psalm, and he's going to ask me and all that kind of stuff. So finally, I walked into the den, and I got to my computer, and it all came out in 10 minutes. This big. And I was crying like a baby the whole way down. And the next thing I know, I'm on my knees again, and I saw my son. He was small. It wasn't as vivid as yours. It was kind of smoky, but a taller person had him by the hand. And it was gone. But it was real. It was absolutely real. So you can't escape your conscience. If I can say it in some respects here, I'm an example, and maybe you see as well at 30 years. It doesn't matter how long it takes, it's going to just keep nagging you and nagging you and nagging you until it's about time that you have to deal with it.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for everyone being willing to share from the heart.
Thank you.
It's a gift.
Thank you, Lila.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.